Good morning, Grace Church family. It's a new day, and so that means it's time for another devotion. I have really been encouraged by the responses that you guys have given us as a staff for these devotions, and I've also been really grateful to be able to do them. And yeah, I just have been so thankful for our church community over these past few weeks, and I am just so in awe of the Lord that He still allows us to be the church and to do church, even though we're not in the same place or the same community. With all that said, I do miss leading worship in front of a congregation. I miss you guys all so much, but I have been encouraged by each and every one of you, so thank you, and I hope you're doing well. What I want to share today is something that the Lord has been teaching me, and I want to share it with you guys because I just feel like it's a truth and it's something that we all can grow from, and so I just pray that it comes as an encouragement today, but also motivation for just understanding the things that the Lord has called us to. So I'm going to start with just by reading some passages from Genesis, and it's going to be a very familiar story, but then I hope that the Lord will connect the dots for you as He did for me, in just the ways that this story connects with the season that we're in right now. So I'm just going to start by reading from Genesis 12 verses 1 to 3. This is the call of Abram. So this is just the promise that the Lord gave him, and it kind of shapes the rest of the story, but I'm just going to read it for you. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So this is just the Lord's promise to Abram at this point, of what He's going to do, and like how He's going to make great nations out of him. He's going to bless him and make His name great. And we know through reading the rest of the story that the Lord does this, and the Lord keeps His promise. But at this point, Abram is probably a little bit petrified. He's like, I don't have children, so I don't know how this is going to work. I'm old, my wife's old. How are we gonna start a family to make great nations and whatnot? So in his brain, I don't know what he was thinking, but I feel like he probably would have been a little bit terrified. And he was also called to leave his country, the place where he was comfortable in, and to go to a place that's not even named. It just said, and you will go to a place that I will show you. Anyways, and so he probably was a little bit terrified in that as well. And if not, he doesn't think like I do, but that's how I would think. And in Genesis 22, skipping a whole lot through the story, it talks about the sacrifice of Isaac. And so we know that the Lord blessed Sarah and Abraham with Isaac, their son, whom they love. And in Genesis 22, the Lord calls Abraham to sacrifice him, which again is a very familiar story, and it has been for me for a very long time. But look, the Lord just opened my eyes to see it in a new light, which is something I just love about the Lord. You can study the same passage or the same story forever, but He has this incredible way of just using His Spirit to teach you different aspects of it in different seasons. So I'm grateful for that. And in Genesis 22, it says that the Lord called Abraham, and in verse 2, it says, He says, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. So I always laugh at that part, because it's like, if there was any confusion as to like which son he was supposed to take or what he was supposed to do, like the Lord is very clear. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, like He just makes it very clear, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering, on one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. And so this is what the Lord has instructed Abraham to do. And this probably was not an easy thing to hear, because in Abraham's brain, he was probably thinking, but God, like you gave me Isaac to make great nations. Like this is where the nations are going to come from, is through Isaac. And he didn't hesitate though. His response was obedience, and full obedience. It says in verse 3, so Abraham rose early in the morning. That is a big thing sometimes, like rising early and being obedient. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him. This could have been for accountability, to make sure he actually did it, like we have no idea. And he took his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the offering, and he prepared 100% in obedience as if he was going to sacrifice his son. And the way that the Lord was just teaching me through this story was, we know that God knew that Abraham wasn't actually going to sacrifice Isaac, but he was just testing his willingness and his faithfulness to God in how he was going to follow his orders, or how he was going to live out in obedience. And I feel like in our time right now, in our season, we don't know what's going to be canceled in the next 2 months, 6 months. Like, we have no idea. And so I was thinking about it, and I have been asked to speak at 2 different camps this summer, and I have felt called to do that. I have felt like it was something that the Lord wants me to do, but nothing's actually canceled yet, but these things could be canceled. And so in my brain I was like, Lord, did you not call me to do that? Like, what is going on? I'm just very confused, because I felt like I sensed this thing from the Lord to go and speak at these camps, but then it just all seems confusing right now. But the way the Lord was teaching me was that he knew that Isaac wasn't supposed to be sacrificed, but he knew that he had to call Abraham to test his obedience, to see if he would actually live in obedience to the Lord's promise, even though it seemed like, even though in Abraham's mind it seemed like this call to sacrifice Isaac was counter to the promise that he had already given him. So in my brain, I'm thinking, for me, like, I feel called to go to camp, but now that everything's canceled, I might as well just give up, and I might as well not prepare. I might as well not do these things, because I'm not going to be speaking at camp. But the Lord wants my obedience. He wants my response to be in eager obedience, to rise early and to prepare for these camps in the summer. And so this is just one example of so many things that the Lord has been teaching me through this. But even though it seems like his call to be obedient is like counter to his promise that he's promised earlier, we know that we serve a faithful God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and we know that he doesn't go back on his promises. And if he promises one thing, or if he calls us to one thing, he's testing our obedience, and he wants to see if we're going to live in willful obedience to him, and to see if we are going to actually do the right things in order to follow his call. And it just seems like sometimes it's easier to think like, oh, God doesn't know what he's doing, or he's called me to this, but I'm not actually going, so why does it matter? Like, we just have to live in obedience to him and trust that he has a plan, that he knows what he's doing, and that we just have to believe that he is, and trust and surrender our agendas, surrender everything, and just to live in that obedience. And so I hope that this is making sense, and I don't know where you're at. I don't know if you're feeling disappointed because maybe things are canceled, or maybe things might be canceled. I don't know what's going on, but I do know that we serve a God who is faithful. He does not go back on his promises. He calls us to things, and he wants us to live in obedience to him. And so I don't know what that obedience looks like. Maybe it's doing your dishes. Maybe it's staying true to your New Year's resolutions. Maybe it's to work on your summer bod. Like, who knows what these things are, but we just live in obedience, trusting that he is faithful, and that he calls us to things that are good, and that he wants us to daily surrender our lives to him, and to just trust him through this time and through this season. Because I think of the song, the desert song Bridge, all of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing, and I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season. And this is the all of my life. This is the in every season that we sing about. And so I just pray that this was clear and that it made sense, but also that we would respond to the Lord in obedience, and that we would just trust his timing and trust his leading, and that we would still be sensitive to discern his voice, and just to lean into him during this time. So I just pray that you may be encouraged today, and that you would respond to the Lord in obedience. And I just thank you for listening to this video. Bye, guys.